Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, brought to you by Briar Greaves. Protecting your assets starts with a company you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, Briar Greaves Insurance are the people to go to. So check out BriarGreavesInsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. We got a lot to talk about on today's show. The Bucs re-signed somebody in the secondary. We had a couple of press conferences today via Zoom. And as you see on the title, we're going to talk about what's next for the Bucs in free agency. Will they make another move? They made the signing yesterday with Bryce Hall. Will they make another one before the draft? Are they fine going into the draft? And we'll kind of look at a position by position as well. So let's get to it on today's show. I'm your host, Matt Matera, joined with me, a colleague of mine at PewterReport.com, B.A. Bailey Adams. Bailey, thanks for joining. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, not much. A whole lot of nothing and a whole lot of everything. Kind of back and forth between different things. Was at Universal yesterday, which was very cool. Have a wedding to go to 4 hours away on over the weekend this weekend. So busy times, but all good stuff.
Hell yeah. It's great keeping busy. I'm going to a wedding on Saturday too, but I'm flying, so a little bit different. But yeah, a lot of exciting things going on. New players keep trickling in, but it's not necessarily the splash moves like Hassan Reddick just yet. We're going to get to Mark Fisher's super chat in just a moment. But first, let's get into the news. It actually broke while I was on the podcast yesterday with our buddy Jay Retcher. But Bryce Hall is coming back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He signed a one-year deal with Tampa Bay. There was a lot of conversation whether or not the Bucs were going to bring him back, whether Bryce Hall was going to come back, or what even market was out there for him. We all know what happened last year. He was with the team, had a kind of down training camp, but it is training camp, and then had that ankle and leg injury the first week of the season and missed the remainder of the year. So, Bailey, just your initial reaction to this move. Do you like it? Are you okay with it? What's your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I'd say it's somewhere in between. I'm okay with it, and I actually like it because I think we put up. It was actually shortly after our Pewter Report roundtable went up this week.
Yes,
on Tuesday, and the question was, what should the Bucs do next in free agency? Something we're going to talk more about as the podcast goes on. And my answer was pretty generally add more depth to the secondary. I was happy that they signed Kendall Vildor to be some depth, but I kind of wanted some more, even knowing that they're probably going to add one in the draft. Just go out and sign another one. Josh was more specific. I believe Josh's exact title was go out and re-sign Bryce Hall.
It was.
And I think I think it's a good move for them. He's a guy, obviously, who knows the defense, never really got to have his season get off the ground last year. I believe he broke his leg in week 1. So yeah, I mean, hopefully better results this time around with the re-signing of Bryce Hall. And I do like that they have a little more depth there at cornerback and a little more experience.
I'm totally cool with it because it's very inexpensive. Like, it's under $2 million. So it's not like the Bucs are baking. Shout out Baker Mayfield. It's not like they are breaking the bank for a cornerback, but at the same time, they're building out the depth of this cornerback room, which they greatly need because of the injury history of Jamel Dean. And we're not even sure if Dean is still going to be on this team once the draft goes through, and we'll see who Tampa Bay acquires through that. But my thought about Bryce Hall is the same that it was going into last season. The only caveat now is if he can stay healthy or if he can be ready by the beginning of the season, because it was kind of a freak play, a freak moment when he got injured. It wasn't just like he was running and stubbed his toe and therefore he was out for the season. It was kind of a crazy play and he got carted off. So you knew it was very serious there. So moving that aside, my thought with Bryce Hall specifically is, okay, this is a guy that has starting experience. He's also a guy that was a starter, and then the Jets drafted Sauce Gardner and they signed DJ Reed. Then he got moved to the bench, but then was able to start in spot situations because of other players getting injured. And that's exactly kind of what you're looking for in this Bucs secondary, because as great as Zion has been being healthy, Jamel Dean, that has not been the case. And it's funny because Zion, Bailey, used to be the guy that was the spot starter and essentially became a full-time starter based on the injuries to the other guys. I think whether it's Vildor, whether it's Hall, one of these guys will be ready at the jump right away. So from a depth situation, I don't think it hurts the Bucs in any way. It just makes their secondary stronger, because the secondary was a big weakness last season. I mean, I know the whole defense was a weakness, but a part of that weakness was because Hall wasn't there really from the get-go.
Yeah, and that's kind of almost where I feel like a what if of last season is what if he doesn't get hurt, or what if it's, he gets banged up early on, but he's able to come back and play toward the end of the season. Because when Jamel Dean goes out in that wild card game at halftime and isn't able to come back, you then have a guy with starting experience. And, I think you'd feel a little bit better with Bryce Hall in there versus what they had in Funderburk or Josh Hayes. And I think that Dean's injury in that game and his inability to come back from it really cost them there in the end. And you wonder if there was somebody who had some more experience and was, more experienced depth, and someone who'd been there and been able to step in, if that would have changed anything. And I don't know if they would have gone on to make a super deep run to the playoffs or win the Super Bowl by any means. But I think this absolutely does raise the floor of the depth of their secondary and the cornerback position in particular. And then I think it doesn't preclude them at all from adding to it in the draft also.
Totally agree there. What are your thoughts? Because last season, we talked about this in the podcast. I'm sure we wrote about it one way or another. I know you did a lot of the training camp recaps and all that good stuff. There were times Bryce Hall got beat. I believe he got beat by Trey Palmer once or twice on a specific occasion. How much stock do you put into that of, hey, he struggled here and there, versus, hey, once the regular season's here, you flip a switch a little bit?
I think there's something to both of those points. And honestly, for me, it was long enough ago to where I don't remember the specifics of like how bad he was in camp or anything. And I remember actually, I think it was pretty late in training camp, getting a chance to, he was brought out for media availability, and he gave a really pretty long press conference, if I remember correctly, where he was kind of just talking about, what he could add to the room and just his experience of so far being from the Jets coming to the Bucs and all that. And really nice guy to talk to. And I think it was maybe a week till the regular season started. And then there was a week later and he was out for the season. So I think, we'll see it. And like you said, it's so inexpensive and there's so little risk to it that why not? I mean, at the very best case, or I think the best case scenario would be, say Jamel Dean is a guy you end up holding on to, and you draft a corner, then you have Jamel, you have Zion, you have a rookie corner, and then you have a fourth and fifth cornerback. They have Vildor and Hall, two guys with starting experience, and all of a sudden you kind of have a more well-built room than you did last year.
Yeah, if Vildor or Hall end up being your fifth string cornerback, I think the Bucs would be in a pretty good spot in that situation. And it's funny you brought up that press conference, because it was outside and everything that. I remember that specifically. And I'm curious what his outlook is of the defense now, after really just getting to sit and watch it up close and personal for a full season. Because remember, the defense that he came from with the Jets 2 seasons ago, that was no blitz at all, get home with the 4-man pass rush. Now, the Bucs are trying to do that a little bit now, but even if Hassan Reddick ends up being the real deal with the Buccaneers specifically, we know what he did with Philly back in the day. I still don't think it's one of those things with Todd Bowles, a tiger can't change his stripes. Yes, former pass rush, but he's still going to blitz a lot. I'm curious how much that impacted things during training camp a little bit when he got beat from time to time. But overall, I'm optimistic about the move, no doubt about it. We have a super chat to get to as well. Thank you to Mark Fisher for the $4.99 super chat, who says, dumb question, but what is the penalty for being over the cap when so many are? And is it a real issue when so many players will be cut before week 1? Well, everybody has to get cap compliant. So the reason why you can't be over the cap is because why do you get to spend more than another team out there? So what the actual fine is, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty positive it's taking away draft picks, maybe finding them on the side as well, that obviously would not affect the salary cap that you're already over in the first place. But there is a reason that you have to be under the cap. Yes. Or else then everybody would just sign every single free agent willy-nilly. That's just not how it goes. That's why you see teams like the Saints have to do these crazy restructures and guarantee all this money to Derek Carr, even though they kind of want to get rid of Derek Carr because he hasn't been the contract that they signed him to, what he really should have lived up to. So you can't go over, and that's because if you did, then everybody else would.
Yeah, and I think what you kind of see is, and I know there's a lot of people like to say the cap isn't real. It obviously is. There are reasons teams get into cap hell and all that, but I think what you see around the league, and especially with the Bucs, is kind of strategically like finalizing these moves, or they'll maybe agree to terms with somebody, but then if they don't have the cap, obviously that's when you see a restructure for Tristan Wirfs or something like that, so they can create the money they need to in order to get cap compliant. I don't know. Yeah, it's not a dumb question at all. It's a good
not
question.
At all.
I don't know. I probably should know, but I don't know like when you have to be cap compliant and by, if there's like a certain procedure that you do this by this time and make sure you avoid these penalties. But it's not a bad question at all.
No, and that's why Jason Light has guys like Mike Greenberg to make sure that they are all good to go once the season rolls around. And that's why also there are the specifics of a post June 1st cap hit. That's why you see guys get cut after training camp as well. So there's several factors that go into it. Mr. Folger says, don't forget to like and subscribe. Yeah, that's correct. Please hit that like button as we kind of get underway with this show. Also, we are less than 100 subscribers away to 18,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, which is almost crazy to say. So please make sure you subscribe and tell your friends about it as well. But thanks for the reminder, Mr. Folgers. And Paul Bowen with a $1.99 super chat. Thank you very, very much. Says Todd Bowles appreciation post. I would be curious if you could follow up on that, Paul Bowen. What is your appreciation of Todd Bowles, the TODD, if you will? Is it all the crazy blitzes that he has dialed up? Is it his ability to keep the players together when things have not necessarily gone the way of the Buccaneers? I'm just curious in general because, Bailey, as you know, Todd Bowles is kind of a polarizing figure amongst Bucs fans. Some are okay with what he's done with the team. Others kind of demand a lot more. I feel like it's kind of right in the middle with Todd.
Yeah, it's interesting because, obviously you've been around the Bucs a long time and before the Super Bowl years and all that. And obviously I grew up watching this team and remember what it was like from, 08 to 2019, them not making the playoffs, pretty much rarely ever having hope. So a lot can change in a few years and expectations are a lot higher. But I think that second point you made, in favor of Todd Bowles is the thing that goes underappreciated probably by a lot of people because, he gets, a lot of credit for being a defensive mastermind. And I know that there was a lot of criticism, I think rightfully so at times last year, but you also kind of look at when he wasn't dealt the best hand personnel wise, when he has his number 3 cornerback go down with a broken leg in week 1 and has to cycle in different safeties constantly because Jordan Whitehead and Antoine Winfield Jr. are getting hurt. It's a lot harder to do what he does when he's dealt that hand. But what he did do in response to that, obviously 2 years in a row now, is keep everyone together, kind of rally the troops together and down the stretch and still keep that NFC South streak alive. And I know he gets a lot of flack from time to time, but I think he has done a really good job of doing that, especially the last couple of years. And, when he has a healthy defense, I'm curious to see what this year is going to look like. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how much this group bounces back as it's rebuilt.
Paul Bowen follows that up with he's the dad of the team, adult in the room. But I also feel like he's got a good humor. I shouldn't say like a childlike humor, but that sarcastic humor that it's like he's a fun dad, if you will. Then, of course, on the other side of it, Lugs Gaming says Bowles sucks. He brings nothing to the team. And that's kind of what I'm talking about is people are all over the place with Todd Bowles. Yeah. Some like him. Some really don't like him. But, that's the beauty of sports is everybody can have their opinion. And At times, nobody will ever waver from their opinion. That's why there's hot takes. That's why there's keeping receipts and all of that fun stuff. All right. We spoke a good amount about Bryce Hall. He was supposed to have a press conference today, but his flight got delayed or something like that. So he was not part of the assembly line of Zoom press conferences we had today. We ended up speaking to Sterling Shepard and Anthony Walker Jr. as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up having a press conference with Bryce Hall maybe tomorrow or Friday or potentially next week as well. But it started off with Sterling Shepard. And I'm glad that Sterling Shepard's back. I'm not expecting him by any means to... I expect like pretty much similar production from him this upcoming season. And if there's not that much production, it's hopefully because everybody's healthy at wide receiver and therefore he's not playing that much. But I thought it was really cool with Sterling Shepard when he talked about, one, it's either play for Baker Mayfield or retire. Like he will not play for another quarterback in the NFL the same way that Gronk only wanted to play with Tom Brady when he was coming out of retirement. And that's what made all those reports about Gronk going to the Broncos during the draft, most recently when we were at the Combine, be a little fugazi. And then I also thought it was cool, too, that Shepard kind of had mentioned that one way he still gets inspired, and this goes back to his past couple of seasons with the Giants, is that he still gets inspired and hyped up seeing like other people around him have success, whether it's the wide receivers around him or really anybody on offense. So it was cool to see like him say, I'm not paraphrasing, of course, but I, come to this team and I can show my value. I can show what I'm worth, but then also, give advice. And he mentioned Bucky Irving by name, who certainly isn't a wide receiver, but just seeing the growth and potential of everybody. I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I thought also what was interesting, he talked a little about Jalen McMillan as well.
He did.
And kind of reminding him that I guess even if during that touchdown streak toward the end of the season, that it always isn't going to be this easy. Jalen McMillan ended up with, was it 7 or 8 touchdowns as a rookie? And, the reality of it as a wide receiver is there might be years where you have only 3 or 4, or even for Chris Godwin a couple of years ago, having just 1 touchdown or 2 touchdowns. And it can change in a heartbeat. So for him as a rookie to have as many as he did, it was just kind of funny, the veteran Sterling Shepard reminding him that might not always be the case. And I was also thought for what Sterling said about it's always been his mentality to kind of go out there and earn everything, and it's not going to be given to him. Because I know if we were to ask me now, I think, he makes the roster. Obviously, he's going to be maybe the number 4, number 5. But if they end up drafting a receiver, maybe day 2, maybe it's even day 3, that's giving the Bucs 4, maybe 5 young receivers, and then he's kind of toward the bottom of the roster. So I kind of was interesting to hear him talk about, I'm not going into this as if anything's just going to be like there for me. Like I got to go out and still prove my value to the team. And I think that's the reality that he's in. But yeah, it was also just him coming back, I think is definitely valuable in that veteran leadership. And, I think he still does have some good football to play.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit, in terms of a leadership and mentorship role, it takes a little bit off of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Of course, everybody's going to turn to Mike and Chris first. They've been on the team for a very long time. And Sterling even went on to say, like, I let Mike and Chris do their thing, and then I'll, like, chime in when it's needed or if somebody asks me something. But he started off as well. He said, in my 9 years in the NFL, I've been a part of a lot of groups, and not one has been as close as the guys we've had in this locker room, especially in the wide receiver room. You've got veteran guys in there, and then you've got a good balance of younger guys as well. So we're able to speak life into those guys and help them in any way that they need. But we also have the experience in the room with Mike and Chris, guys that have done this at a high level for a long time. It is a special combination. Then he spoke about the coaches as well and Josh Broussard, because that's certainly one of the big storylines this offseason with no more Liam Cohen. Now it's Josh Broussard. But he said that's the reason why I chose this place in the first place. He said, I love the group of guys that we have already established. Them being part of it last year, it was very encouraging to me, which is ultimately the reason I decided to come back, just because of knowing the system and being in the system before. It's not like a major change because Josh Broussard, is in that spot now. being in the second year of an offense, you have a grasp of what they're asking for you. You know how you work well with other players and what they're going to ask of other guys. And I have a true understanding of what my role is. Also, just being around the coaches, I love this group of coaches. They work well with each other, probably the best that I've been around. Now, he did have a lot of coaching changes with the Giants, so that probably played a role into it. But that's very strong words from a 9-year veteran in this league. You don't necessarily hear that all the time. But that's also why I like Sterling Shepard. I'm not going to say he lets it fly necessarily, but he's not afraid to share his opinion and kind of let the chips fall wherever they may.
Yeah, and I do. I appreciate that about him. And I really got caught off for a second because I don't know if I wonder if you run into this, because talking about Josh Grizzard, with all the players calling him Grizz, do you have a hard time separating Josh Grizzard as Grizz versus Taylor Grizz Jenkins? Because I always knew Taylor as the Grizz. And that sometimes I'll hear Grizz and I'll immediately think Taylor. And then I'm like, oh yeah, wait, they're talking about Josh Grizzard. So I don't know, as somebody who knew Taylor better than I did or knows Taylor better than I do, I don't know if that's something that you've found as well.
It's very funny you say that, because the first couple of times when they say Grizz, I do think of Taylor Jenkins. And shout out Taylor. He's my dude. I loved working with Taylor. We were interns together, traveled a good amount together as well for Pewter Report and other things. And it's funny because I remember seeing his Twitter today and thinking oh, Grizz, he's a big baseball guy, so he's usually tweeting about that. But yeah, there's no doubt. I certainly thought about that at first, and that's a nice Pewter Report throwback for those that have been listening for a while. But I think as it continues to go more and more, I certainly will think of Josh Grizzard, the offensive coordinator, as well. But that was a good pull from you right there. The other person that we spoke to today was Anthony Walker Jr. I almost want to say Anthony Walker Jr. the third, as they say on the Dan Patrick Show. It was very cool kind of learning more about him, because at first, Levante David said the other day, that's my guy. I'm a very good friend of his and all that stuff. But I did not know that they had worked out together. Every offseason they work out together. And Levante David essentially recruited Anthony Walker Jr. to come to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and help fill out that inside linebacker room. And the Bucs certainly aren't done in that area. But I also found it very interesting that he has a great perspective of being a coverage linebacker, in the sense that he went from defensive back to linebacker when he was in college at Northwestern. And then even before that, he was a high school quarterback, with his dad being the head coach and an offensive coach as well. He said offensive coach. I would guess that probably meant offensive coordinator or play caller as well, maybe even quarterbacks coach. I know players in high school kind of play all over the place, but quarterback is certainly one where your peripherals are all over the place. So he just brings a wealth of knowledge to the game, from being a quarterback to a DB to a linebacker, that I don't think everybody else does.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting hearing him talk about that, and kind of hearing him explain what that perspective does for him on the field. And kind of going back to what you were saying about his relationship with Levante David. Yeah, I just had a question come to my mind where he was talking about it. And I know, Levante had obviously mentioned it in his press conference. But then he also talked about he knows Kalijah Cansey as well, because he said he's a Miami guy. And it just it never fails to kind of amaze me. All the Miami NFL guys, they just all know each other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they've never played together, and there's just kind of a community there. But hearing Walker talk about, him and Levante have always wanted to make this happen. They've always wanted to play together on the same team and be teammates. And so for that to finally happen, for Levante to come back for a 14th season and be teammates with, a good friend of his, it's a pretty cool story.
You would think with all these Miami connections that somebody would have tried to talk some sense into Antonio Brown, but I guess the message kind of soared there. I also wanted on the record, I tried this with Kalijah Cansey last season, and he ended up leading the Bucs in sacks with 7.5. I thought I'm a big fan of sack celebrations. We all love the Yaya Sub-Zero with Kalijah Cansey. I thought it was a perfect built-in sack celebration to go, you can't see me. because Kalijah Cansey, you can't see me. He didn't
Mhm.
go for it, but maybe he will go for it this year. The other thing I loved from Anthony Walker Jr. III, he got asked about pass coverage in general. I know it's not Jr. III, it's Anthony Walker Jr. He got asked about playing in coverage and all those different things, and he went out of his own way to essentially say, don't worry about the PFF stats. Watch the tape. So now you guys can watch the tape of Anthony Walker Jr. talking about it. Wait till the end. That's where he really gets to it.
Obviously, defense is all about just knowing where your spot is, and everyone knowing where their spot is, and understanding how offenses can attack us, and making sure we limit those games when they do throw it there. But obviously, it starts out with me doing my job, and my job is to cover the middle of the field. I pride myself on not allowing the ball to be thrown behind me or deep behind me or deep in front of me. That's my job, and that's me knowing, what the defensive call is and executing my job at that time, whether it's I'm blitzing or I'm dropping in coverage or I'm stopping the run, whatever it is. You just want to execute your job and make sure the other 10 guys are on the same page as you with what the defensive call is. So, I see all the stuff on social media and everything where people be like, oh, it's PFF grade and all that. I'm here to tell you, you can watch the film. The ball does not get completed behind me or in front of me in the middle of the field. So, and that's how I feel.
I just love that. It felt a little Michael Jordan from The Last Dance-esque of and I took that personally. Now, for those wondering, what were his PFF grades last season? They are not ideal, again, from a PFF standpoint. His overall grade was 48, right on the dot. His pass rushing grade was 44.2. His best was his run defense grade, which was 69.5. That was a little bit above average. That was 67th out of 189 linebackers. And his coverage grade, which is part of the reason why the Bucs wanted to bring him in, is technically the worst at 39.1. That was 164th out of 189 linebackers. But I think it's important to specify that while I do value the PFF grades with a lot of certain things, they are not the gospel. They are not the end-all, be-all of what something can be. And I really, truly think that inside linebacker is one of the positions that PFF doesn't get the best grades overall because there's so much context to inside linebacker specifically, what your coverage is on a play, whether it's man or zone, whether you're blitzing or whatever the call may be. I think a lot of times, in years past, Levante would get a bad grade and we're all like, what the hell? Levante balled out. He had 12 tackles and 2 forced fumbles. How the hell did he end up with a 55 or whatever it may be? I think PFF is very important, and I even think offensive line, they don't always get it right. But the grades are important for the offensive line, specifically if you want to use them in certain areas because there's no other stats for the O-line. And even though I still think they get them wrong, at least with linebacker, you can look at tangible things and be like, oh, he had this amount of tackles, he had this amount of sacks, whatever the case may be. But I did like that he was essentially fighting for himself and got ahead of it of hey, I know the grades say this, I know social media is saying that, but that's not the case, folks.
Yeah, and I think we kind of walk that line a lot, and I find myself doing it too. Is just it obviously isn't the gospel, but I think the grades are helpful if they're used as a tool, not the only tool. Obviously, you can use them to refer to the grades as much as you want, but you also have to be able to back up those grades with tape. And I know obviously they watch the tape to come up with these grades, but like you said, there's a lot of context to it. What's the assignment? They do their best to try to gather that and take a good glimpse or try to get a good glimpse at what are these guys supposed to be doing. But if you use the grades in conjunction with watching the tape and kind of form your own conclusion to it, I think that's always more helpful than just purely going off the stats or just the grades.
Right, for sure. And another great tool to use is Briar Greaves Insurance when you're trying to find the right insurance for yourself. If you're a longtime podcast listener, you probably remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Briar Greaves Insurance. Pewter reports Scott Reynolds has been a Briar Greaves customer for years and there simply isn't a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. Visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar Greaves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to help people find the right insurance policy for you and your family. So whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Briar Greaves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. The days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. With Briar Greaves Insurance, you'll have a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area, there is a cost to living in paradise. Briar Greaves Insurance can help make sure you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. So visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's BriarGreaves. Call their office today at 813-876-4166. One more time, that's 813-876-4166, and tell them that Pewter Report sent you. Okay, I want to get to a couple of more comments first, a little bit with free agency. Free agency-related questions. Let's start with Lugs Gaming. Says, it's malpractice by Light to not have Zadarius Smith signed already. Same for Calais Campbell. So, Zadarius Smith has been a solid edge rusher for years, but I feel like Zadarius Smith is kind of getting to the category that Jadeveon Clowney was for a while, where it's like, okay, you know what he brings to the table, even though he's a little bit older now. And Clowney for years was signing with teams like very, very late into the summer, like before training camp, but would go to the pretty much the very end. I feel like that'll be the case with Zadarius Smith. I can't say for 100%, but because the Bucs went after Hassan Reddick and they got Hassan Reddick and they re-signed Anthony Nelson, that leaves, in no particular order, Yaya, Reddick, you got Chris Braswell, you have Anthony Nelson, and then you have a couple of others on the practice squad. I would be shocked if the Bucs didn't add at least one more edge rusher through the draft. I'm curious. They must obviously truly believe in Hassan Reddick if they're going to pay him $12 million guaranteed, and then hopefully all the way to 14. But I wouldn't necessarily call it malpractice that they didn't go after Zadarius Smith. Now, say Braswell doesn't totally work, and say they don't go for an edge rusher in the first round and elect for like a third or fourth rounder instead, well, then maybe next season is kind of the year that you double up on like 2 veteran edge rushers and maybe one works out. But I don't necessarily know that they have to do it just yet.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think what the Reddick signing does for them is gives them a lot of potential at that position, obviously. They're excited about what Yaya does, and those two as your starters, Yaya and Reddick, I think is a good place to be right now going into the season. Obviously, like you said, the depth they have, re-signing Anthony Nelson, having Chris Braswell still in the room. I do think, and if you were to ask me right now, what position are they going to target in the first round, I'd still probably say edge rusher. I know our mock drafts have still been pointed toward Donovan Ezeraku, and I think I like that idea of having a young, first or second round pick coming in as maybe, by the season starting being your number 3 guy in the rotation. Then you have those top 2 starters I mentioned, a rookie you're developing who has, star potential, and then 2 very, or at least Anthony Nelson being very serviceable in what you hope Chris Braswell can develop into is a really good player. I don't think, and this kind of plays into Scott's answer to our roundtable this past week, is, he doesn't think they should do anything else in free agency until after the draft. And I think that's more than fine as far as a strategy right now, because they've done a good job at these different positions, bringing in Hassan Reddick and re-signing Anthony Nelson at edge rusher, adding 2 corners, adding a linebacker, bringing Sterling Shepard back. They've done a good job of like leaving all options on the table for the draft. They have they're not they're not boxed into a corner for any position having to take that one right away. And then they can kind of see what they can come up with in the draft. And from there, I think that's when you kind of find some of those, for lack of a better word, hired guns, like the 1-year guys that maybe come in and give you more depth when you didn't realize you needed it.
No, that's a perfect way to describe it, is hired guns. And it's very interesting because on yesterday's show with Jay Retcher, we respectfully disagreed a little bit. And I'm curious how you feel about this, Bailey, because I am of the belief right now, whether the Bucs like sign someone else in free agency, whether they just kind of stay put until the draft, I still think the Bucs are in a spot where they should just go best player available, regardless of who it is, unless it's, quarterback or I know we talked about like Tyler Warren and tight end. I think I would maybe stay away from tight end a little bit, or even like Genty if he somehow drops all the way to 19. But Jay's point was kind of like, look at who they've drafted in the first round over the past couple of years. They were positions of need, but also they started right away. Graham Barton this year, Kalijah Cansey the year before. These were guys that were immediate impact players, and that's what Tampa Bay needs. And he was kind of talking about as well, like, well, if this corner's available, And my whole point was, well, if these two corners are available and this edge rusher is available, it's still going to be, who do they value more? Now, if they love all three the same, then I think you kind of go with the corner based on that is a little bit more of a need. But if you like one more than the other, you shouldn't just draft a corner based on the positional need. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think like that's kind of what I was getting at, is like they've put themselves in a position where they can go best player available. Obviously, like you said, if they're in a situation where there's multiple players they like, honestly, what they might do in that sense is, like you said, maybe they do take a corner because it's a little more of a need. But I also can see what they kind of did in 2022 and trade down a little bit. Maybe add some capital and hope, of the 3 players they like or 4 players they like, they're able to still get one of those guys where they're, filling the need at a best available position, but also adding some capital to it. But, I think I'm somewhere in the middle of that. Like, I think, yeah, they're in a good spot to go best player available, but there's still going to be, some needs you'll value over others. And I think that's probably where they probably end up most years, is they're in a spot where, because you never want to pigeonhole yourself into we have to take the best player at this position no matter what, because that's just setting yourself up for failure. And I think what this team and this front office especially has done so well lately is they're drafting well. And so they've done enough in free agency now to let them do what they do best, go in and draft another good class and fill the remaining holes you have. Then from there, if you have to go back into free agency, you can. But I think they've set themselves up well to do what they do best, and that's draft.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Bailey. We have a $1.99 super chat from Malcolm Harvey. Thank you very much. Who says, when can teams start having draft prospects visit? Well, it's coming up pretty soon. The only reason why there haven't been really any just yet is because teams are still in the middle, or colleges are still in the middle of doing their pro days and everything like that. So a lot of these players have to go through their pro days before you can start doing all the top visits and things of that nature. But we will have a tracker once those reports start coming out. And it's very interesting, right? Because sometimes you can connect the dots to these visits being very important. Devin White, I think, is a great example. I remember Bruce Arians kind of talking about how fantastic their visit was, and that's why they took him 5th overall. And then you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum where they completely did not want anybody to know about Kalijah Cansey, so they didn't meet with him at the combine or anything like that. The Bucs have been sneaky, but they've also been kind of forthright in how they want to go about things. But when that does come about, we certainly will have articles about it. We'll have a tracker about it. By the way, make sure you check out the free agency tracker that we have. We just updated it with the Bryce Hall news yesterday. And anytime there is any new news, shout out to the New Heights podcast. They always say new news. New news, I think is how they go about it. We will update it as well. as we talked about a little bit, we had a roundtable the other day. Essentially what the title of this podcast is, what should the Bucs do next in free agency? Bailey, what was your response?
My response was to go out and find another depth corner and kind of give yourself, like we were talking about earlier with the signing of Bryce Hall, give yourself that potential to have experienced guys at your fourth and fifth corner spots. So the fact that they went out and re-signed Bryce Hall kind of fulfilled what I wanted them to do next in free agency. And now what I kind of find myself, I'm walking in between, I don't know if it was you or Adam who said, go get a safety. Was it you?
That was me.
Okay. So I agree with that. I like that idea, but I also kind of can see where Scott's coming from as far as what we were just talking about just now was, they don't have to do anything until after the draft. Once they know what holes they've filled on the roster through their 6 draft picks, then maybe go back out and see what else you need. But I'm somewhere in between yours and Scott's answer now that mine has been already done yesterday.
So I will talk about my reasoning in just a second, but there's a little bit, it's breaking news that doesn't impact the Buccaneers specifically, but it's a little Buccaneers adjacent. Okay. I've seen different reports. I'm not sure if the hiring has happened or if there's expectations that the hire will happen. But Colorado, who already has Warren Sapp on staff, apparently Deion Sanders might be hiring former Bucs offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich to the offensive coaching staff. Really? That would be very, very interesting. I know how Bucs fans feel about Byron Leftwich. We've had many, many reports on Byron Leftwich and how that whole situation went down. He was a benefit of overall, talent with Tom Brady and Antonio Brown, and of course Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and over and over and over, as John V says, first down, run up the middle. I always thought it was curious after it didn't work with Jacksonville. The fact that when Byron Leftwich got let go, that no team in college or the pros hired him again. I mean, I don't know what Tampa Bay was necessarily saying behind the scenes, but yeah, I mean, good for Byron for getting another opportunity. I was always very surprised he couldn't get some type of job at Marshall, given that it was alma mater. But I mean, I don't know what to expect from Colorado this year now that there's no Travis Hunter, there's no Shepard, but congrats to Byron Leftwich. Regardless of how it ended with Tampa Bay, he did win a Super Bowl with the team. I know people are going to say terrible things, but good for him for getting another chance.
Yeah, and I was kind of always surprised that he didn't have, and this is kind of, I think, the next step for him if he wants to get back into coaching is, I don't know what the position is going to be, but yeah, maybe a lower level assistant is kind of something that you see a lot of coaches kind of go into that, I don't call it a rehab program, but you've seen coaches even in college, they'll get fired and then they would go to Nick Saban's staff and just be an analyst and do that. And then doing this and getting back into the game gives him a shot to then, maybe he goes back up to being a positions coach again, or he does get a coordinator job somewhere else at the college level. So, yeah, I mean, on the road back to coaching and football again. It's good for Byron.
We're going to talk about the Bucs safety position in just a moment, but first, let's hear a message from our friends over at Walk-Ons.
Yeah, so what happened out there tonight?
We struck out at home with leftovers, then we remembered walk-ons.
What effect did the situation have?
Spirit soared. Nick took on a burger, Jen obliterated her ribeye po' boy, and speaking of spirits, Laura even scored a real tasty cocktail. She needed that.
Any lessons learned today?
Yeah. Head straight to walk-ons.
Scratch-made dishes, wall-to-wall TVs, craft beers, and cocktails. Walk-ons for the win.
It is slam dunk madness over at Walk-Ons. Of course, March Madness is starting up tomorrow. Well, there's some games tonight, but the main tournament starts tomorrow. So head on over to a Walk-Ons. They have fantastic deals all over the place, Monday through Sunday, whether it's their appetizers or their drinks. There is a special out there for you. And there are 3 walk-ons in the Tampa Bay area, one over in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a third in Midtown Tampa. I know on Friday I will be over at the Midtown Tampa if anybody wants to stop by and say hello. I'm going to be watching these March Madness games. I'm very, very excited for it. It's one of the best times of the year. So check out Walk-Ons and enjoy all of their delicious food and drinks. Bailey, have you filled out a bracket, and who's in your Final Four?
Oh, I don't even remember, but I've got to look. I definitely have filled out a bracket. I was getting lost in that, the picture of that food there. And finding myself wishing I could join you at Walk-On's Midtown on Friday. Then I remembered I have to drive for that wedding I mentioned earlier. And I was like, I'm going to have to, I'm safely going to have, keeping tabs on the games maybe as I'm driving. Although I am driving early in the morning. I might get to the Airbnb before games tip off. That would be ideal. But I know I'm going to the wrong app like 4 different times now. I do have Duke winning, unfortunately. I'm not a Duke guy, but I just think that I think they're the best team. So I know that I have them in the Final Four here we finally are. This is taking a lot longer than I thought it would when you asked me the question.
Sorry.
I have them beating Auburn in the final. So, yeah, it went a little chalk. It's Auburn, St. John's, a 2 seed, and then Duke and Houston as 1 seeds. So I do have a future on the Johnnies to win it all. I'm hoping kind of that's
so do
the case. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I have St. John's over Auburn in the Final Four and Kentucky over Wisconsin. And then I have St. John's beating Kentucky in the final.
I like it.
I just, never mind. I was going to do, Rico Bosco with Bama. I can't see them going. And I don't know, like everybody's picking Duke. So I just have a feeling they, may not make it, especially with the injury to Cooper Flagg as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the reason I went with, safety for the Bucs to continue to add right now is essentially really the only big move they did with the safety position was re-signing Kayvon Merriweather. Of course, they let go of Jordan Whitehead earlier this offseason. We were actually at the Combine when it went on. So it kind of leaves the Bucs in the same spot they were in, with the caveat of Tyke Smith is probably no longer going to be your nickel corner. He moves to strong safety. So you solidify the 2 safety positions a bit more with Antoine Winfield Jr. being fully healthy this year and Tyke Smith, and you can move Christian Izien into that nickel spot. But if one of those guys goes down, and let's face it, Antoine missed, 9 games last season, and Tyke Smith missed 4 as well. If one of them goes down, sure, you could do something where Izien goes back and plays safety, but I feel like the odds-on would be, for the time being, that Kayvon Merriweather ends up playing that safety spot. And he played there for a little bit last season, and it was a little less than inspiring, if you will. Now, of course, they could draft a safety this year, and I wouldn't be surprised by that either, because there are several rounds. But if you're not drafting, and I know they got Tyke Smith in the 4th round, and maybe that was a heck of a steal. Actually, it was the 3rd round, excuse me. And, that was a heck of a steal. I don't know how valuable safeties beyond the 2nd round this year are compared to last year, where it felt like there was a good amount because you had 1,000 Georgia Bulldogs coming out, where this year Malachi Starks is a guy that we've talked about on the show, and he's the next Georgia Bulldog. He played with Tyke Smith at Georgia. But if they don't get a guy like him, are you trusting a 3rd, 4th, 5th round safety, 6th round safety, whatever, to go and replace one of these guys? I don't necessarily think so. So that's why I'm okay. Again, they're not here to start specifically. But you have a couple of guys like Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon, Quandre Diggs, Von Bell, Chuck Clark, Marcus Williams. These are guys that have been around the block. They've played the position. Todd Bowles wants guys that he can trust, and typically you can trust veteran players in the defensive backfield than you would with a younger player.
Yeah, I think there's plenty to that, and I think it all kind of depends on how the market continues to play out, because obviously we've had the big first wave of free agency, and that's over, and you're seeing some other teams like obviously the Bengals doing their re-signing of T. Higgins and the extension for Jamar Chase. Like, you're seeing some moves still get made, but it's obviously died down quite a bit. And I wonder if they are leaving that that door open to adding another safety, whether it's in the coming weeks if the right opportunity, comes about, or that if they're talking to somebody right now, or like we were just saying, if it is, maybe they draft one early, and if they don't get one early or don't find one in the draft that they think can be like that number 3 guy that's maybe going to start a few games if somebody goes down, maybe they go out and see and give somebody a call, because I think there might still be some of those guys that you mentioned who might not have a spot just yet.
Speaking about giving mentions, it's probably a good time to give a shout out to our Pewter Platinum members. Thank you so much for your support at pewterreport.com and our YouTube channel. So shout out to Scott Federico, Rachel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, Zach Brannigan, RP89, Eric McMillan, Connor For Reals, Zach Jarvis, and Kevin Thomas. We cannot thank you enough for your support of our YouTube channel. And speaking of our YouTube channel, we have another show coming up. We're calling it Bucs Mock Draft Madness. We're going to come up with a couple of different scenarios, do a mock draft. Might do as many mock drafts as we can in an hour. Maybe we'll do one where we just stay put the whole time, one where we have to make a trade at any point, maybe one where we trade Jamel Dean. Open to options as well. So that will be our show tomorrow. I know March Madness is going on. We can chat about some March Madness as well if everybody wants to. And then for our Pewter Platinum and Premier members, on Friday, the Pewter Insider returns. The topic will be how Hassan Reddick impacts the Bucs. And SR will be back for that show as well. So that's our Friday show. Very much looking forward to it. Let's get to a couple more comments as we end the show. I can't recall. I don't think we got to this one yet, but I've been looking at it for a while. Keita Villain, who is a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, thank you very much, says, do you guys feel like the Bucs are limiting themselves as far as options for DBs in the secondary, or will they have addressed everything they need to once the draft is over? Bailey, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think that's along the lines of what we were just talking about. I don't know. I'm curious to see how many more, or if they make any more signings at corner or safety, as we were talking about, because I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe they go out and get some more cheap veterans who are just brought in to compete with any potential draft picks. Obviously, you got to have the space for it, and there's no guarantee they'll end up making the roster, but I think they're being strategic with who they're re-signing and who they're signing right now, just like we mentioned, to keep their options open for the draft and potentially making some of those summer moves. If it's somebody who becomes available post June 1st or whatever the case may be, I think that there are still all options on the table right now.
Yeah, they've really kept the door open. And remember, I always use this as a great example of how they found Leonard Fournette back in the 2020 season. That was like right before training camp or whatever it was, and the Jaguars had just let go of him. I can totally see a situation, and it's a great point that you make, Bailey. I could totally see a situation where they find a veteran off of another team that ends up getting cut, or maybe they want to go with the younger guy for whatever reason. And also, like, remember, as far as like depth signings and things of that nature, that's what Bryce Hall was last season. Now they did it again, but then they also did it with Vidal. So they kind of doubled up on it and flooded the position, and they will continue to do that as well. Now, maybe they haven't done that just yet with safety outside of re-signing Kayvon Merriweather, but you can't address and plug every single hole on your team. That is what the draft for is as well. So I think that's really important to kind of factor in. And that's why I'm fine with the Bucs bringing in a safety or whatever the position may be. But if they just want to say, all right, we're going to go about it in the draft, that's fine. At the end of the day, my theory is trust Jason Light and the staff, because they've proven to be right over and over again. And who am I to go and question them? Kieran Butt says there's a big reason we didn't sign Smith and a 40-year-old Campbell, and that's Reddick. Yeah, that plays a big part of this as well. Kieran follows up with another one that says, right now, I think it'll be one of Campbell, Starks, Ezaraku, or Walker at 19. I could see that for sure, especially Ezaraku. I think if he's there, I would be shocked if the Bucs didn't go with him. But it would have to
Yeah.
be someone else that truly has knocked their socks off. Bry says Malachi Moore out of Alabama could be a good 3rd, 4th round pick. It's so funny because when I do like the PFF mock drafts, and I guess we'll see on tomorrow's show as well, I always see him dropping like much even further than that. So I don't know about that one. And then Abraham Vatican Cherry says Shiloh Sanders also can be a key special team standout. I don't know about that one, Bailey. It seemed like Shiloh did not have a good showing at the Shrine Bowl. And I feel like if he does get drafted, it's going to be a little bit because of and I'm not here to call nepotism or anything like that, but I think it's going to be a little bit because of Deion Sanders than necessarily, hey, we like that guy. But, there's a number of players that maybe just make it in the 7th round versus being an undrafted free agent. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Shiloh Sanders guy, just in a little I've seen him play. As far as him being a special team standout, he could be, but I don't know that if I'm the Bucs, I don't know if that I want another guy who is nothing more than a special team standout. And as of right now, that's mostly what Josh Hayes is. It hasn't done enough at corner to make me feel confident in him being, somebody they want to rely upon for depth. So, yeah, I don't want to fill too many of those 53 roster spots with guys who are just going to be special teamers because I don't think Sanders is going to be, an NFL DB.
We'll do one last comment. This one from Jerome Parham Jr., who says, "Why is Dean still on our roster?" We talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show, Bailey, but one big thing I think is, we just saw the money that Stingley got. We saw some of the money that these other corners have been getting in free agency. I know Dean has his flaws. I know he gets injured a good amount, but for the money that Jamel Dean is going to get this season, if he's still on this team, and there's still a possibility that he gets cut after the draft, it's not that much in relative to what some of these other guys have gotten in this free agency.
It's funny how it's just been, I guess, a couple weeks now, and he's gone from maybe they'd cut him because he's making a little too much to he's kind of a bargain. Like he's actually at a pretty reasonable price. So yeah, I think that's a large part of it. And obviously, something that I think I wrote about a couple weeks ago was when they made the move or they made the trade of Carlton Davis last year. They did that with the knowledge that hey, we've got our replacement in Zion, and if they traded or cut Jamel Dean right now, they have no other starting option opposite Zion. So then that's what we were talking about earlier. Then you are basically pigeonholing yourself and saying we've got to take a corner at 19, or at the very least, we have to get a starting corner on day 2 early. And I think they want to leave all their options open. That's kind of seems like what they're doing with Jamel still being on the roster and still being penciled in as a starter.
Yeah, that seems like the plan for the time being. Our plans for tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow, Bucs mock draft madness. We're going to go through a couple of different mock draft scenarios and draft the new team for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then Friday, the Pewter Insider for Pewter Platinum and Premier members. How Hassan Reddick impacts the Bucs. We'll dive into that and answer questions and comments from our Pewter Platinum and Premier members as well. In the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video as well. That's going to do it for us on today's show. For Bailey Adams, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. Good luck with your brackets, and we'll see you tomorrow for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.